Hello and welcome to another Tag1 Team Talk episode, the podcast and vlog of Tag1 Consulting. We've got another awesome show for you today. We're going to be talking with Michael Hess, who's one of the leaders of the Drupal Security Working Group and the Drupal Security Team. Michael's going to give us a rare inside look into what they do and how they operate and work. I'm Michael Meyers, the Managing Director of Tag1 Consulting. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Could you give folks just a quick overview, a brief background, who you are, what your role is in the Drupal security team?
Sure. So I have been in IT since I was young, like most people that I know in this community. I went to the University of Michigan for an undergraduate degree, got a master's degree, started teaching classes at the University of Michigan, got involved in Drupal with a nonprofit venture at that point, and then kind of moved into using Drupal in a bunch of places, and then got involved with the security team by finding bugs or security vulnerabilities and submitting them.
Wow. How long have you been doing Drupal now?
Feels like a trick question. I don't know if I want to tell you how old I am.
I've been doing Drupal for, oh my gosh, almost 17 years. And as far as I remember, you've been part of it for most, if not all of that. My memory is fuzzy at this point, but it's been a long time.
I just looked up my profile and it says that I've had an account on Drupal.org for 14 years and 4 months. I'm fairly certain that I was involved in Drupal 2 years before I created an actual account and started contributing back. That was a mistake, by the way. I should have done that immediately, but I can't go back in time 14 years.
So what is the Drupal security team and what's your role on the security working group and the security team? What is the difference? There's a security working group, there's a security team. What's going on?
So the security team is actually I think it's the oldest subgrouping of community members working on a specific project, with the exception of maybe core maintainers. But we have lots of different groups in Drupal that do things. And I think, and someone could correct me on my history here, and I'm sure someone will, that the security team may have been one of the first. I think it may be, other than core committers, it may be the first one that's still active and running. We had the documentation group that got created. There's the copyright group that's around, and then and as Drupal has matured, we have a lot of these specialized groups that are involved. The security team is responsible for the security of the code base itself. We don't take a look at individual people's sites. We don't even proactively necessarily scan for vulnerabilities, but when there's a security issue that's reported to us, we are the group that is responsible for the triage and the process to get that fixed. The security working group is somewhat newer than the security team, and it is really the liaison group between other groupings within Drupal. Security team itself is 30 people. The working group is between 30-ish people. The working group is between 2 and 3 folks at any time. And there, we take the concerns of the security team and figure out how in the processes to get things fixed. And so that might be, hey, we need a new feature added to Drupal.org to handle this type of thing. How do we go about doing that? And so, we take those needs and we bring them up the food chain, so to speak. 32 people on the security team currently.
Wow. And is everybody on the team a volunteer?
Yes. And so I say yes because everybody on the team is a volunteer. The Drupal project does not pay anybody to be a team member. So you can't, there's no job application with the Drupal Association to become a Drupal security team member and receive a check. So everybody is a volunteer on the security team. Having said that, there are some organizations that will pay for the volunteer time to the security team, so they get sponsored to be on the security team. Now, I should be careful in saying that because it implies that, if you pay for a security team member, you might get access to information. When that occurs, the company that's sponsoring it does not get any information back from the security team. We do thank companies who sponsor people's time in security advisories. Shows up on a block on the side of the page. But there's not an information sharing thing there. It's like sponsoring somebody to work on a module. And obviously if you're in a sales agreement, a sales process thing, you could talk about, that we have X number of people who are on the security team, and therefore when we're selling you that we know how to do security, we speak with authority. But there's no, hey, if you contract with XYZ company, we have 6 people on the security team, and those 6 people will tell you all the secrets of Drupal. That would be grounds to be removed from the security team very, very quickly. And so the process of the security team overall, we have volunteers, and the volunteers, some have specializations. There's folks that really are good with this area of the code base, or are good at the integration problems where different subsystems combine. And we have generalists who will take an issue and do some triage. Maybe they'll do some testing. Maybe they'll do code reviews. And so, yeah, that's kind of the overview of the security team.
Given these different specialties, and I'm sure the ebb and flow over time, but is it possible to generalize, like if someone is participating in the Drupal security team, on average, are we talking they're putting in 20 hours a week, 2 hours a week? Does it ebb and flow?
It definitely ebbs and flows. And like with most things with COVID, that's had an impact on this. But for the most part, we have people who put in, we like to ask for, a set block of time a month, and that's kind of in the application process. But in reality, once you're on the team, we will accept what you have available. You're a volunteer, you're not an employee, and things happen. So we have people who do everything from, 5 hours a month to, 100 hours a month. And it depends on what's happening that month. We may have a large release where we need to pull in a lot more people who are going to be reading over a core release, for example, or we may have some cleanup tasks that we need to do, and then we'll get together. Unfortunately, not in person at the moment, but previously we might arrange a security team sprint where a couple of us would get together and kind of work through issues. It may be that you get assigned an issue that looks like it may be easy on the surface. And with most things, when you start digging into it, it's quite complex. And so, your 2-hour task is now a 15-hour task, because that never happens in software development. But it is the average time. I don't think there really is an average. It also depends on if you're receiving support from your company to be putting time in. Are you a volunteer that's doing this out of personal time, or are you getting, is your employer sponsoring you?
Definitely some sort of like minimum monthly obligation to stay active in the group.
With some exceptions, sure. I mean, we're all humans, and sometimes people, need to take breaks and whatever it is. We're all in a Slack channel, and there's often, your obligations may be in there. But how we, how the team works together is a process that, is kind of organic. We do, because there is sensitive information on the team. If people aren't active for an extended period of time, we typically have a conversation with them and say, hey, can we get some assistance here? Once you are a security team member, if you need to step down, for whatever reason, we had a security team member whose wife had a baby. It's like, I don't have time to do this anymore. You're always welcome to come back if you need to leave and, come back at a later date. We're all human.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that it's very organic. Are there any formal structures or roles? Like, it's funny. I've been in the Drupal community for almost 20 years now, and you guys are a bit of a black box to me. And so I was really excited about this conversation because I've always wanted to know, like, what happens? Like, someone sends in a vulnerability report. What happens then?
So 2 separate questions, kind of. Let's take the second question first, though. What is the workflow? And I'll share with you after we're done. I've got a diagram of this, actually. But effectively what'll happen is we receive reports, and they typically fall into 3 categories. We have maybe 4. We have a security conscious person who is not really part of the Drupal community, who thinks they found an issue with Drupal. and they submit it. And sometimes those are, hey, I installed Drupal, I logged in as admin, UID1, and I turned on full HTML, and I can now hack my site because I can get cross-site scripting to run. And so, that's one case of things. We get the reports from people who are security researchers and who, found an actual issue that isn't, you used an admin account to do something. We get people who are community members who are trying to find issues, or may have found one by mistake, or they work for a company and their security team has reported something to them. And then sometimes we'll have module maintainers who are responsible for their own module code come to us and say, hey, I made a security boo-boo. Can I get some help here? Unless it's the module maintainer, the workflow typically is that the issue will come in and it'll get triaged. And sometimes that's as easy as just reading the report and saying, yep, this seems like a valid issue. Sometimes there's a little bit more testing that goes into it. We'll actually try to reproduce it. It depends on the issue and where the issue is involved. At that point, we will bring in the code owners and, or the code managers. And, that for core, that, there's framework owners, there's subsystem maintainers. And so, we find out where in core that belongs. For modules, it's the maintainers of the module. And, typically there's an automated message that goes out that basically says, hey, there's a security issue, don't fix anything, read over this, propose a patch. And at the moment, security.drupal.org is still on a patch-based workflow. We are looking to change that now that Drupal.org has GitLab. That's amazing. But for now, we are still using patches. And what we'll do is we'll work with the code maintainer to fix the problem in private, and we'll agree on a fix. And sometimes that, if it's the maintainer who's reporting the issue, oftentimes it comes with a patch. Hey, I broke this. Here's how to fix it. Anybody have any feedback? We try very hard to keep the patches that get fixed to security issues only. Mm-hmm. We don't want, especially in contrib, there's sometimes the thing of, oh, well, I've also got all these other changes. I want to release the security patch, and I also want a 500-line diff of lots of other things that I'm fixing at the same time in the security release. We want the fix to just fix the security issue because it makes it easier for folks that need to do the updates. Mm-hmm. After we've kind of, gotten to the point where the code is ready, we will have a discussion around the security advisory. And so the tooling we have helps us draft these internally. We will go through and, write up the security advisories, which is what gets published to Drupal.org. Mm-hmm. And once we've got them written up, we then go through this publishing ritual. The maintainer will commit their code, create the releases. We will take care of putting the security advisory on Drupal.org, linking to those releases, and then we publish both the release and the advisory at the same time on Wednesday and send an email through Twitter and typically make an announcement in Slack.
Can you share the kind of volume? I don't know if that's information that you can disclose, but are we talking tens of reports, hundreds, thousands?
It's not hundreds. It really seems to go in cycles. I will say that we got, at the start of COVID, we got a lot of false reports. Which was interesting. And I think, people were working at home and they were trying to find issues. And, and when I say false reports, I want to be really clear. A false report isn't bad. If people are looking at a problem and trying to find holes in it and they submit something and it's not valid for whatever reason, that's that's not a bad thing necessarily. That's a good thing. They were spending time on it. We're giving them a response. There's a lot of, there's a grouping of people who do a lot of spamming around reports. Mm-hmm. And, there's a line between I'm spamming a project with a report and I'm writing the same thing to 20 different projects and it's the exact same write-up. You're missing DMARC records. This is a major security issue. You must fix it immediately. Oh, okay. And they've clearly written an automated thing that's querying a bunch of domains and sending an email based on the response from the DNS query. That's one side in which, okay, that's a little abusive, but if someone's going to download Drupal and spend time finding something in it, we encourage that even if it's a false report. And, we try to be careful that when we're telling people that the reports they get aren't are invalid, that's okay. Try again. Eventually you'll find something. We all can't start off finding security issues. I teach a class on this at U of M, and it's interesting if, you get the question, how long does it take to find a valid security issue? You want to guess?
I mean, it could take seconds, it could take years, I would imagine.
That is correct. There's not an average time there. Sometimes sometimes you look at code, you think about it in your head and, oh, whoa, wait a minute, that's SQL injection there. And sometimes you can look at a code and you've got this instinct and it's like, I think there's something wrong there, but I don't know what. And so, yeah, this is the fun of finding security bugs. So I'm always encouraging people to find security bugs. If you find me at a conference, I am more than happy to help people, get started finding security bugs. In fact, anybody on the security team is probably as happy to help with that.
And I would imagine by its nature, the majority of things don't pan out. They turn out not to be problems and bugs, and that's a good thing.
The majority of issues we get probably fall into that category. The ones we get that are bugs, we typically, after having read thousands of these, you can tell pretty quickly, how serious something is. You get like a sixth sense for reading the vulnerability reports. At least I do. I don't know if other people do. But I'm weird, so.
What's the silliest bug report? Is it the I logged in as an admin and it let me do anything?
I think the worst one was I edited PHP, added the neckline, and now I can hack my site. And it's like, but even in that instance, it wasn't, I mean, yes, that's an invalid report, but it's writing back and, it's not saying, well, that's dumb. Why would you do that? Like, if, there's an education part there. Well, how were you able to edit PHP code? Here's a Drupal site. How would you edit PHP code on on Drupal.org if you don't have access to the server? And, then there's an education component there. And we want to be careful that we're not discouraging people from, trying to find issues because they find something and, they think they found something and they haven't.
I have another question. Do people try to bypass the security team? And are there any examples of that? So maybe, for example, instead of reporting a vulnerability to you, to you meaning the security team, they post it publicly, or.
We don't have a lot of examples of that I can think of, at least nothing recent, where, and I think bypass might be the wrong word here. There are people who are unaware of what we do and how we do it. So they might, they're a new module maintainer and they just fix their module. Mm-hmm. We've got some controls in place technically that prevent that from happening. So like if you're publishing a module and you check the security release button, it won't publish your module until a security team member comes in and says, yep, that's a security release. And, the process has been followed around that. One of the things that we'll get threats on is we'll get, security researchers who are like, hey, I found this bug, it's moderately critical and you have a week to fix it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't fix it within a week, I'm going to publicly talk about this. That happens occasionally. For the most part, almost all security researchers I've worked with have been reasonable people. And, we have, Drupal core does not release every week. Mm-hmm. We don't have a security window for Drupal core every week. And so if you talk to them and, you engage them in the process, they are typically, reciprocal. There was one group that we were working with, this was a while ago, where they submitted an issue and, we fixed the issue and we posted a patch and we asked them to test it. And they thought that was really cool. Wow. Because normally they're used to just reporting bugs and, companies just fixing them and say, we fixed it. And they're like, we get to be involved in the process of fixing the issue. This is cool. And it's like, well, welcome to open source.
I didn't know that. So when you, as a module owner, do a release, you have to check a box which says this is or isn't a security release. And if I check it and say it is, then someone on the security team has to sign off on it?
I wouldn't use the words sign off, so I don't remember the exact wording of it, but what happens with security releases is they're published with security advisories. And so the security team is responsible for the security advisory. The module maintainer is responsible for the release itself, but we want to publish them in sync. And
Okay.
so what'll happen is we will tell the module maintainers to go in and cut a release just like normal, but check that security box.
Mhm.
And it does everything that it normally does, but it won't actually publish the release node.
Okay.
And so when we publish the SA, we will then go publish the release node. Actually, we do it in the other order, but we'll publish the release node and then publish the SA so that when you get the email, you can click on the link to the release and you don't get an access denied message when you go to the release node page.
I think Drupal's been hacked.
So yeah, that and there have been times when we've forgotten to publish the release nodes. I think it's happened like twice in my memory. Typically when there's like a lot of different releases in a day, sometimes it's a lot of clicking.
You mentioned when you, in your example, you said, oh, I have a moderately critical vulnerability. Is there like a defined set of terms, like, critical, moderate critical, not so critical? and how do you determine, what it is?
So a while ago on the security team, you could get 4 security team members in a room, have them look at the same issue and say, what score would you assign this? Less critical, moderately critical, critical, highly critical, not a vulnerability. And with those 4 people, you might get 5 different responses. And the reason for that is because we're all coming at this with slightly different, backgrounds. I run a bunch of education sites. My background is in running education sites. And so when I'm thinking about a security release, I am thinking about me personally and my sites. And everybody on the team comes from different backgrounds. There's a lot of people on the team who do client work and they're thinking about their client sites. How does this impact that? But that's really, that doesn't really translate well when we're talking about, how do we communicate this out to third parties? If you've got a site that's a brochure site where users are not logging into, you don't really have untrusted user input in a node body, for example. And so a site where someone can put something bad in the body of a node, okay, not really a problem for you because you've got 8 people who can log into your site. They're all employees and they're all relatively trustworthy. Whereas if you've got a site where anyone can create content, Drupal.org, for example, well, that's a whole different issue. And so one of the things we built was this risk calculator tool, which is basically based off of some of the NIST and CVE standards that asks some questions and generates a risk score for a module. And that's what you see on Drupal.org with the security advisories. It'll have a score out of 25, and it'll have the words, moderately critical, highly critical, critical. And that's, so the idea is that we can get 4 people in a room, have them rate an issue, and we end up with 1 score. In the future, I would love to expand that out and put personas with it. And so, here are 4 different types of sites that we commonly see. And for each site, here is the risk score associated to it. Because, we really don't have one monolithic site. If you've got a site that is entirely providing a REST API to a front-end tool, then you've got a whole other layer of security issues that you might be concerned about that me, just having a, brochureware site where the Drupal theming layer renders everything, there's no REST endpoints enabled, or, there's no user interaction. There's 2 different sets of vulnerabilities there. Obviously, there are a common set where, no matter what I'm doing, they all apply. But, I think that if we expand this out, the evolution of that would be, we're going to give you a risk score by kind of, site use case, site persona almost.
Now, you said earlier that you guys are mostly or entirely reactive in that, you're not proactively looking for security vulnerabilities. If someone reports a problem, the team will investigate it. So do you guys have a role in like a Drupal core release process, or because of the fact that it's, reactive, explain that to me. What's your,
So let's put core off to the side for 1 second. We are responsive to reporters telling us about security issues. We have not found, and we have looked, and if anybody has ideas, please reach out to me, for some type of good proactive scanning of sites. One of the largest things we get are false positive reports that are generated by automated scanners. there is some work by a couple members of the community to do a Drupal specific site scanner, where it is familiar with Drupal and it's looking at, it's a static code analysis tool. It's looking at the source code. Sometimes it's running it and testing, if I put this in this variable, where can it come out on the other end? But it's a really hard space to proactively look at security vulnerabilities in. And there's no, this is not just us, by the way. This is every open source project. One of the things that we haven't discussed yet is, one of the scariest things with the new world we're in is the dependency chain.
Yeah.
And it's not just Drupal's code; it's the entire ecosystem and every dependency that we pull in, and then of course every dependency that we're pulling in. And to proactively try to review all that code is not really directly possible. So, we do need better automated tooling around this. I don't know what that looks like yet. But, the security team since the beginning has been very has been a reactive group. I don't like that necessarily. I would love us to be more proactive, but I think the space in which we are proactive now isn't necessarily in code scanning, it's in education. There isn't a Drupal event that we don't, there isn't a DrupalCon at least where we don't have at least one security focused presentation. It is much easier to help developers be aware of security issues and be trained on security issues than it is to pay developers to go and review code line by line trying to find security issues.
I think I should have said this at the start. You and the team are amazing. Like, the work that you do, the fact that it's been part of Drupal for so long, the effort that people put in, the coverage that we get. I really do think, Drupal in many ways is a model for many open source projects. And I think the security team in particular is something that we do really well. So you guys should be really proud of what you've achieved and what you've done. And it is not an easy problem for all of the reasons that you mentioned. And it is impossible in the current world and circumstances to be proactive. It's just not going to happen.
What we have done, which is unique among content management software frameworks, is we cover our plugins, our modules, our ecosystem. Most of the major content management platforms, security teams cover their core product. We issue security advisories for modules that have opted into that process. And so our workspace is significantly larger. I know when, for a while we were talking with a few vendors on, replacing security.drupal.org with a vendor supported tool. And that might or might have not come with vendor supported, people to do some of the initial triage, which would have been awesome. And then they realized the scope that we cover and they're being slowly backed away. When we've run bug bounties, we cover a much larger scope than most all the other open source projects that are running bug bounties. What's nice about Drupal is we have, great APIs, and when our APIs are used correctly, they prevent a large number of security issues. I remember when we had cross-site scripting issues everywhere. And then we, turned on Twig and we moved over to Twig, and most of our cross-site scripting issues are no longer a problem. And sure, occasionally you'll have a developer who passes things to raw and escapes the Twig escaping of cross-site scripting issues, but that's an education thing. And it happens, and that's actually one of the things that's easy to automatically scan for. But in some instances, that's an acceptable use. And so let's actually take that back to the earlier question. If we were to try to scan for, you could say, well, let's find everything in a Twig template that's going through the raw filter and bypassing the auto escaping tool. There's a use case for when that should be allowed. Yeah. And so how do you program, if I set it as a security report of every time raw is used, well, then someone's got to track down, find all the code and be like, okay, 95% of these are valid use cases. And that one over there, it requires an admin only permission to do it, which we won't issue a security advisory for anyhow. That's why automated code scanning is really difficult.
Yeah.
Because there's, you have to have the mental model behind it. Sorry, I derailed the question a little bit.
No. So another thing that's fascinated me for a very long time, you just mentioned, the security team doesn't just cover core, it also covers contrib. And when you're browsing contrib modules, you'll see, this module isn't covered by the security team. You said something about a checkbox. Is that something that people opt into coverage? Is that something the security team decides we're not going to cover this? How does contrib coverage get determined?
So maintainers are given the permission to opt in their modules. And at the moment, that is based off of a fairly lengthy process, which is the project application queue process. Mm-hmm. There's been an initiative within the security team to replace that process with a better mechanism. That process is slow, and that it takes a lot of people a lot of time to get through it. It requires the work of volunteers to do reviews for other modules. It's a very effective process in that it's really good at education, but it is a very frustrating process. And so so once you're through that process, you can opt in any module you want to the security team workflow, but it is still your choice. And while you may have that privilege, you may say, this module really shouldn't be used in production. I don't want security team coverage for it. I'm okay with, the issues here being put in a public queue, because you shouldn't be running my module that, prints all the available variables on a production website. Like, it itself is a security module, as a security risk. You'll have folks that say, this module isn't really ready for prime time. Yes, it's getting used, but I'm not done with it. I don't want, there's a warning that comes with this. Every now and then you'll see people who will go into a modules queue and say, hey, please opt this into coverage. We really want to use it on our site. And, we really like to use modules that are only covered by the security team on our site. So we get proactive notification, or not proactive, but notification about security issues in advance.
Yeah.
Not advance. I'm sorry. I have not had my coffee this morning, and it is really obvious. I apologize. I should have had a cup of coffee first. No one gets notification in advance. Let me be very clear on that. But you get notification when there's a release published. If you're dealing with a module that isn't covered by the security team, then the module maintainer can fix a critical security bug at 2 a.m. on a Friday night. And maybe you'll get the RSS notification. What the security team process gets you is that security advisory that comes out on Wednesdays, and you're aware, what that window is, and you can have your staff available on Wednesdays to address that concern.
So, Michael, you've been unbelievably generous with your time today. We went way over. There's so much more I want to ask you. This was, like I said, for a guy who's been involved in the community for a really long time, you gave me insight and answers to things that I've been wondering about for a really long time. So I hope that other people learned as well, as much as I did. I'd love to have you back in the future, because there's so many more things I wanted to cover. But this was great. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me. Have a great evening and a good weekend, even though it's a Friday and I don't know when people are going to be watching this, but have a good evening.
Thanks, Michael. Please remember to upvote, subscribe, and share this out. You can check out our past talks at tag1.com/tagteamtalks. You can check out the end of life presentation I mentioned at tag1.com/EOL for end of life. As always, we love your feedback and suggestions. Let us know what you thought of the show, topic ideas for the future. You can reach us at Tag1 Team Talks at tag1.com. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and joining us today. We'll see you soon. Take care.